Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel where we're going to be doing something a little different today where I'm going to be ranking all 25 Pixar animated films. Pixar has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. Finding Nemo and A Bug's Life were on a constant loop during my childhood. In fact, I think I could sing the end credits song from A Bug's Life before I could talk. So these movies mean a lot to me. This is, of course, in honor of the new release of Turning Red on Disney+. And I'm just going to start this out by saying Pixar is very personal. I know that a lot of people, especially me, these movies hit us even, before we like movies in a way. And so what's going to be higher or lower on the list could differ depending on what age you were when you saw these movies, how these movies affected your childhood. And other than that, we all have different tastes. It's what makes, discussing film interesting. So I'm going to ask that when you disagree with me, and you will disagree with some of my picks, try to be respectful. Comment below your own list if you care to, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. Without further ado, let's get into the list. Now, what I assume will probably be a unanimous choice is that at number 25 is Cars 2. Now, I will give it this, that it is at least engaging. I'm never bored while watching the movie. I just think the movie makes so many fatal misunderstandings on not only how to tell an effective story, but how to tell an effective Pixar story. Sidelining Lightning and making Mater the protagonist, I really think that is where a lot of the issues stem for this movie. The movie just never seems to justify why it's making the choices it is. Like, why is this a spy movie? Why? It doesn't really make sense. I mean, nothing in Cars really makes sense. Number 24 is Brave. Now, I think this film is just a mess of tones. And at some parts, it feels like a DreamWorks film. At other parts, it's a Disney princess film. And then at other parts, it's just very boring. And I think that derives from the fact that, you can look at the behind the scenes drama in this movie, the fact that I think they fired the original director. I just think this movie didn't know what it wanted to be, and all of these disparate threads just clash and they don't complement each other in any way. I do think that Emma Thompson does some nice voice work here as Queen Eleanor, and there is a nice mother-daughter bond here, and also some of the vistas are nice in the film. The lack of substance in this story is very noticeable. Now, number 23 is The Good Dinosaur. Sure, it's not a great movie, but it sure is a pleasant one. And I think aside from the dinosaurs and humans, the animation is breathtakingly good. And I also think there is some touching scenes. The scene when Spot and Arlo are drawing, I cannot believe I just pulled those characters out of my head, when they're drawing the home in the sand, or the scene when Arlo and Spot say goodbye to each other. And it also is Frances McDormand, so any movie with Frances McDormand gets a plus because of Frances McDormand. Now, at number 22, here comes probably the first controversial pick, Soul. Yeah, this movie did not work for me in the same way that it seemed to work for everybody else. And I think that really stems from the biggest issue I have, is that I think the film cheats. The whole movie is talking about accepting death and accepting your life as is and not trying to be something you're not. And then the movie kind of gives the main character a get out of jail free card at the end, allowing him to go back to live his life, and he gets a second chance after his death. I was flabbergasted that the movie spent so much time advocating for one message, and then at the last moment, I think because they wanted people to feel good, completely walked back everything they did. I also didn't think the film was as fresh as other people thought. For me, a lot of the narrative felt very repetitive from other better Pixar films. The contrived disagreement with the heroes felt very forced. Despite, I think, Tina Fey, Jamie Foxx, and Graham Norton delivering some really great vocal performances. And I also wasn't a big fan of the whole I'm in a cat, like the body swapping. Like, that really didn't work for me, and the film kind of just stopped to a halt. Though I will say the animation style and score are really well done, and if the script was at the same level, then this movie would be much higher on the list. All right, we're gonna do a run on some sequels now. At number 21 is Cars 3. Yeah, the movie really doesn't leave that much of an impact, but I do think that the scene when lightning does wipe out is really well done. I like the dynamic between him and Cruz Ramirez, and I do think the message is wholesome. But in the end, this movie doesn't even feel like it existed in any cultural ether. It's just there. At number 20, I have Incredibles 2. I think this film is a lot of fun. I think they do a nice job of balancing the action-packed sequences featuring Elastigirl with the more comedic suburban narrative with Mr. Incredible. I think Catherine Keener is a great villain here. And overall, this is a really fun crowd pleaser, but it's not one that, like Cars 3, seems to leave that much of an impact. I think that is mostly due to the third act, where I feel like the first two acts do have the grandeur and some of the dramatic heft that the first one had, but the third act just feels very by the numbers. It feels very, very Disney, instead of having the grit that I think the first two acts have of this film and the original has. And for that, it kind of fades away by the end of the film. Though the first two acts, and really the whole movie, is still very enjoyable. At number 19 is Finding Dory, the long-awaited and kind of unnecessary sequel to Finding Nemo, and I'm not quite sure that Andrew Stanton and company deliver on the idea of a Finding Nemo sequel and why we're continuing the story. Though what's here is, I still think, a very moving and touching story about found family and discovering yourself and finding confidence within you, and Ellen DeGeneres' voice work, as well as the beautiful animation of the ocean and a lot of the sea creatures. I mean, the open ocean exhibit and Sigourney Weaver's voice with the exhibit, like that stuff was really well done. And of course, Baby Dory was just iconic. At number 18, here we go. I can hear the dislikes. Toy Story 3. Yes, this is my least favorite Toy Story movie, and also it is way lower down here. I know this is a lot of people's favorite Pixar movie, but for me, the issue that I have started to see with Toy Story 3 as I get older is that the second half of the movie is very plot-based. As soon as the breakout sequence starts in the movie, the rest of the thematic journeys kind of stop and wait for the incinerator. And so that's a huge chunk of the movie that really isn't doing anything except watching this breakout scene, which again, it's a lot of fun, but I think that the movies above it are challenging the audience more, are doing more interesting things, and Toy Story 3 kind of just feels like a great best of moment for all of these characters. Every character gets a moment to shine, and you know, the moments that they shine are memorable. And I think like Ned Beatty as Lotso is a really great villain. And the movie, I mean, from this point on, I really love all of these movies, and so it's very hard to rank them. I think the films above this are really great stories, where this film are a lot of really great moments loosely tied together that we respond to based on our own nostalgia. Then at number 17, I have A Bug's Life. Now this film means a lot to me. This was one of the first films that I ever loved. And when I look back on it now, I think it's easy to see why. It's a really moving underdog story. I think that there's a lot of really intense moments. I think that villain in real life, Kevin Spacey, does a really nice job of playing a villain in a fictional world, playing Hopper, one of the best Pixar villains. It also has a really great voice cast featuring the likes of Miss Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Then at number 16 is Monsters University, which I put this high on the list because of the amazing third act. I think the third act of this movie is slept on because the revelation that Sully tampered with the scare machine, and then Mike tries to go out into the real human world, and that whole scene in the woods, and then how Sully and Mike are trying to, you know, pull off the biggest scare to get the door back on so they can go back into the monster world. That whole sequence is so riveting and so enthralling that I put the movie this high for that reason. But the first two acts that preceded, you can find a lot to enjoy there, I think, with the whole scare games. And I like the focus, how this one was more focused on Mike Wazowski. I think that was a really smart choice. Then at number 15 is Toy Story 2, which at points you can feel that they're just going through the motions, but when those motions are so great, you kind of don't have an issue with it. This movie will forever be remembered for the When She Loved Me sequence with Jesse and the Sarah McLachlan song. But I also think Woody's arc in this film is really intriguing in terms of exploring identity, especially with inanimate objects. All of that stuff with the Woody's Roundup, and you also have all the really great stuff with the other Buzz and Zurg and the really great airport sequence. Toy Story 2, it may feel like, again, it's another great Toy Story movie, and maybe it doesn't stand on its own as much as other films, but it's a damn good movie that I think, as far as sequels go, kind of gives you exactly what you want in a Toy Story sequel. Then number 14 is Cars. This may be unpopular to put it so high, but I think that the first Cars is a legitimately good film. I really like the character arc of Lightning McQueen. I think the voice work is really good here, especially from the late, great Paul Newman as Doc Hudson. I like a lot of the music in this film, and I think it has one of the best Pixar endings when Lightning gives up the piston cup to go back and help the king cross the finish line. I think the movie is slept on because of how the sequels have changed the opinion of the Cars brand overall, but I think that first film is still legitimately good. It's a bit too long, which is why it's not higher on the list, but as far as animated sports movies for kids, I think Cars is one of the better ones. Also, Michael Keaton joins the Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Frances McDormand club of, if your movie has this actor, it's generally gonna be better. Then number 13 is Onward, which was a big surprise when I watched it early in the pandemic, and I think I needed a movie like Onward at that point. Tom Holland gives a really great performance here. It's surprisingly emotional in ways that you're not expecting, but it's also a great adventure quest. And it has Julia Louis-Dreyfus playing their mom, so again, it gets a little higher because of that. Then number 12 is LUCA. It's a beautiful little coming-of-age story between this little Italian town. If you're not swept up in the mood of the movie, I don't know what to say to you. It's such a charming film. And the ending, again, it comes out of nowhere and hits you and really shows how much you were connected to these characters in ways that you weren't even perceiving. It's a movie that makes a bike chase matter so much. It can bring the scale down, but the emotional scope doesn't go down with it. And that's something to show how impressive they are as a studio. Then number 11, right outside the top 10, is COCO. This is a film that actually has improved for me on multiple viewings. I really enjoy kind of the truth about the entertainment industry and what it means to be an artist. The visuals of this movie, the world of the dead, is so visually arresting. And I really like the dynamic between Hector and Miguel. It's a really nice duo that doesn't feel forced like some of the duos lower on the list. It feels spontaneous, which I really like about their dynamic. And the messages about how family is complicated, I mean, this is not your usual depiction of family because it shows the fault, it shows the infighting. And it also has some great music from the Lopez's. Then kicking off my top 10 is Toy Story 4. What we have here really, I think, confronts the audience in ways that I really respected out of a film that was the fourth in a series. The fact that it was playing with what a Toy Story movie could be, I really responded to. And I think Woody's journey here and with Bo Peep and a lot of the new characters, it's a very, existential movie. And what does it truly mean to be connected to other people and to be alive? I really could sense more in this film than a lot of other animated films, where the camera was being placed and what the director was saying with each frame. And it also just the opening sequence and the animation there, like the rain and then how the fair looks. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful Pixar films ever created. And then at number 9 is Monsters, Inc., which is so brilliant and creative and cathartic. It's a film that really fully utilizes the talents of John Goodman and Billy Crystal and their duo and then their trio with Boo. It's just so much fun. It's a thrilling movie. That door sequence is just, exciting every time. The way that the filmmakers create the world of Monstropolis, It's one of the best world building that you see in Pixar movies. And this was, of course, the first Pixar film directed by Pete Docter, who went on to do such brilliant work. 2 more of his movies are higher on this list, but he's also, I believe, the current president of Pixar. So this began the wonderful journey of Pete Docter, where he just, he made his claim that he was going to make really ingenious stories for the rest of his career. Then number 8 is the newbie on the street, and that is Turning Red. I love the different animation style here. I love the unafraid tonal choices it makes and the discussions it's having with its characters. I love that the messages that the film advocates and the dynamic between the mothers and the daughters and the friends and the family. This movie has, I think, so many things to say, but it's also such a charming and hilarious film that I think anybody, no matter what age you are, can enjoy and find relatable. Then number 7 is Ratatouille, the film that inspired the TikTok musical. I think this film captures the passion that people have for the things that give them life. Remy is such a lovable protagonist, and he leads such a wonderful ensemble of characters, including Linguini and Colette. I love how he feels trapped within these 2 worlds. The movie is so lush, and it's just, you never want to watch this movie on an empty stomach, I'll tell you that. And it also is one of the best scenes maybe ever, which is when Anton Ego is writing his review. I think anybody who loves film, but anybody who loves anything, any craft, will watch that scene and be reminded of why they do what they do, why they spend so much time and dedicate so much of their lives into a certain avenue. It's because we strive to find that electricity that inspired us as kids, that gave us a reason to live. The number 6 is Up, which has a devastating opening sequence that is one of the best scenes of all time. The movie that follows is also really great. I love the whole movie. The adventure story that we have with Russell and Carl and Kevin and Doug, the really sinister villain with Christopher Plummer's Charles Muntz. There's a lot of intensity to this movie, while also being just one of the most heartbreaking, heartwarming movies that Pixar has ever put out, while also featuring one of the best scores of all time from Michael Giacchino. His married life is just exquisite. Breaking into the top 5 is the one that started it all, that being the original Toy Story. It's just a timeless movie, and I think it's the type of film that will never date, because not only was it so important in terms of the advancement of animation in cinematic history, but the way it talks about the cultural changes that you sometimes are subjected to. Woody represents, the Westerns, and then of course, space was all the rage. And we saw that with Hollywood in terms of the Western being the most popular genre. And then Star Wars comes along, and now everybody loves science fiction stories. And so the way that it talks about feeling lost in time and wanting to keep things the same, but knowing that change is a good thing and that you can learn from that change. Then at number 4, we have The Incredibles, which is not only one of the best Pixar movies of all time, it's one of the best superhero movies of all time. I think Brad Bird really does a nice job of mirroring and complementing the superhero story with this family drama. It has some of the most riveting and pulsating sequences in the Pixar canon, some of the most adult interactions and characters that we see in animation. Isn't afraid to treat kids with the maturity that they kind of deserve. It doesn't sugarcoat things. And I like that about The Incredibles. There's, as I said with Incredibles 2, there's a real grit with this movie. Couple that with, as a huge superhero fan and a huge Marvel fan, this definitely feels like Brad Bird's ode to the golden age of Marvel Comics. It also has a great villain and a really interesting villain in Syndrome. Now this top 3, man, whoo boy was it tough. And I went back and forth with all these 3. There's just all three of these movies are on my top 50 favorite films of all time list. So it was very tough. But at number 3, I have to put WALL-E. Aside from the fact that I had a soft spot for Hello Dolly because it was my senior year spring musical, through non-human characters, explores more of what it means to be human than most films ever made. The scenes between Eve and Wally in the first act are just so beautifully done, and it's such a masterclass in show don't tell. But then as soon as you think you know what the movie's about, we go to the Axiom ship, and the movie kind of spins on its head, and it plays with the form of what you were watching. It also has a really great message about taking care of the environment. It's a really entertaining sci-fi story while also being a very moving romance. And it's able to be so many things at once that really should connect. And the fact that they do is just the magical alchemy that is Pixar. Then at number 2 is Inside Out. Just the thematic aspirations of what this movie was trying to accomplish and what it ends up succeeding in doing is just mind-blowing. It takes subject matter that would be impossible to realize with any other studio in any other medium. You have Amy Poehler, who is giving one of the best vocal performances in the history of this medium, paired with such a wonderful supporting voice cast of Phyllis Smith and Richard Kind and Lewis Black, Mindy Kaling, and Bill Hader. The art direction of this movie is iconic. Bing Bong, I will never fully recover. And it also features maybe my favorite Pixar score of all time from Michael Giacchino here. It's just that and my number 1 choice, and Up. There are a lot of great musical moments in the history of Pixar. But the themes of this movie and the fact that you need sadness to feel happiness, there's just, it's perfection. It's absolute perfection. I love this movie so much. So that means number 1, my favorite Pixar movie of all time is Finding Nemo, which it's just a triumph. It is one of the most breathtakingly visualized animated films ever made. How they were able, in 2003, this movie is almost 20 years old, which is crazy. How they were able to capture the ocean still boggles the mind 20 years later. How Marlin and Dory play off of each other is just so well done, and I think is bolstered by the impressive voice work by Ellen DeGeneres and Albert Brooks. Willem Dafoe and the Tank Gang are really great, and I love the parallel narrative structure of how we're seeing Marlin break free and grow as we're seeing Nemo become more independent. This movie is so pure, and I think that this film couldn't have been made by anybody else but Pixar. They have a way of telling such emotional stories and grabbing you and connecting with you as an audience member in ways that it's even hard to define. It's spiritual. And this movie was always the one that did that for me. And so if this is my list and I have to pick what I would think is the best Pixar movie, this is the one that whenever I look at it, that's what a Pixar movie is for me. That's what I feel represents what a Pixar movie is. And for me, that is the best Pixar movie ever made. So let me know what you thought of my list. If you would like to share your own list down below, let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for new videos from Spoilers Ahead with Anthony Post. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you at the movies.